Hey everyone. Thank you again for clicking on my video and listening to me share my life experience with you. I hope you can use some of this information to help you with decisions in your life. With that being said, let's get into it. What is a corporate nightmare? To me, it is a job where you feel you have no purpose, no direction, and you just are a cog in the machine. Whether you do your job or not, it doesn't matter. No one will notice. If you do your job well, still no one will notice. Nothing matters, and that is exactly what Dish Network was to me. So I want to touch on a few different aspects that made it such a miserable experience so you can get an idea of corporate culture, make a better decision for yourself if you are applying to one of those Fortune 500 companies. First, I want to talk about pay at Dish Network. Dish Network's pay salary for business operation analysis is anywhere from $65,000 to $90,000. Okay, not so bad. So what dictates where you will be paid on that range? Is it experience? No. Is it whether you have an advanced degree or not? No. Is it a combination of those two things and negotiating the pay? No. It is based on what everyone else on the team you will be joining is making. I know you may be thinking that this is a good thing, so new hires aren't making more than senior employees. But if those senior employees do not advocate for themselves when it comes to pay, you will be on the bottom end of that range. For my team, they were making the bare minimum. So when HR offered me the job, they offered me $70,000. I said no. I have an MBA, military experience, and business operations experience. They countered and said, unfortunately, they would not be able to offer me more money, and I was in a desperate situation after leaving my previous job, so I ended up accepting it. So I started talking to some coworkers on other teams to see what they were making, and a lot of them were making $90,000 a year, and this was their first job out of college with basic degrees. I could not believe it, and I was dumbstruck because I was making $70,000. Well, during my exit interview with my manager, I asked him why he didn't offer me more money, and he said, I can't pay you more than the most senior member on the team. And that person had been with Dish Network for over 3 years. My manager also asked me not to disclose my current pay with my other coworkers, which means they were making even less than me. So your coworkers can screw you on how much you're getting paid. The next issue I had was with what Dish called their core hours. Their core hours are from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. You have to be in the building before 9 a.m. and you cannot leave until after 4. You can get fired if you are there after 9 a.m. or you leave before 4 p.m. Let me give you an example on how I found out about this. So when I onboarded, they said they had their core hours, but they did not make it clear how serious of an offense this was if you were late. So in my second week at Dish Network, I get to the front door and realize I forgot my badge. You have to swipe in with your badge. That is how they track what time you got there and what time you leave. The time was 8:55 a.m., so I turned around and walked back to my car to grab my badge. As I'm walking back, I see people sprinting to the front door, and I thought that was very weird. So I badge in and I think everything is fine. No, everything is not fine. I get to my desk and my manager says he needs to talk to me. He tells me that I cannot be late again or he will have to fire me. I asked him how late I was, and he said he doesn't know. He just gets an email, and everyone above him, all the way up to the CEO, gets an email saying you were here past 9 o'clock. I asked him, does this apply before leaving before 4 also? And he said yes. So I get back to my desk and check what time I clocked in, and it was 10 seconds past 9. I just couldn't believe it. You were really going to fire someone for being 10 seconds late? Furthermore, are we all not adults here? And is this not a salaried position? Why are we so uptight about time? Another example of this is usually on Fridays afternoons, people will pile up by the door because they have nothing to do, but they can't leave before 4. So come 3:50 p.m., you'll have a crowd of people standing out by the front door waiting to badge out after 4. The reason they are so uptight and controlling is because of the former CEO and the current president of Dish Network, Charlie Ergen, who is a control freak, and that will bring me to my next point about Dish's culture. Dish is about control and perfection. Charlie personally owns the building Dish Network is headquartered out of, so you can't work from home because he can't rent out the building to Dish to enrich himself even further. Another example of this was I was in charge of making sure the invoices from T-Mobile were correct before we paid them. I would compare the invoices from T-Mobile to our internal audits, and if everything was right, I would send it to the VP for their approval to pay T-Mobile. These invoices would range anywhere from $2 million to $5 million a month. Well, 2 months in a row, our amount was different from T-Mobile. Our amount was a couple $100 more than what T-Mobile was saying we owed them. So we owed less money to T-Mobile than we thought we were going to pay T-Mobile. Well, I let the VP know and they said, don't send it to me if it isn't right. I let them know that we were saving money and it was only a couple $100 out of multiple $1 million invoices. They did not care. I let the VP know that we are now behind on two invoices owing T-Mobile over $7 million and they would probably shut down our network, and they said that would not happen and to figure out the issue. So I go to another employee who works the back end of the process who was completely incompetent. He had no idea how this stuff worked. He forgot how he set it up and he was unable to find the problem. So I was unable to find it. But one day my manager comes to my desk and says, "You need to submit the invoices right now for approval because T-Mobile is threatening to sue us and permanently kick us off their network." So what I took away from that experience is Dish Network is about incompetency, perfection, and control in that order. Another thing that sucked, which wasn't Dish's fault, was the commute. It was a 30-mile drive from where I live, and if you know anything about Denver traffic, that is an hour and a half to 2 hour commute one way. That means I was wasting 3 to 4 hours of my life, Monday through Friday, sitting in traffic, because God forbid you work from home. Because of this, I would show up right before 9 and leave basically at 4 on the dot. After a few weeks of doing this became a problem. My manager called me in and said I needed to be at work at least 8.5 hours a day. I looked at him with pure confusion and asked if I was an hourly or a salaried employee, and he said salary. I asked him, "Am I getting all my work done?" And he said yes. So I asked him why I would have to work 8.5 hours if I got all my work completed. And he said, "Well, that's just the expectation." I asked him, "What if I don't work 8.5 hours?" He said, "It just doesn't look good and I can't promote you." So again, this is all about control. They just want people in seats. Another thing around corporate culture at Dish is they would have ice cream socials or things similar to that every couple of weeks. Can you guess what time they would schedule it? 5:30, after everyone's workday is completed. 8.5 hours after the latest someone can clock in, which is 9 a.m. They wanted to make sure this stuff was not on company time because this has to be your own personal time. Lastly, I want to talk about the people I worked with. Most of my coworkers came from privileged families. They talked about traveling to Europe as kids, the privileged high schools they went to. For example, one of my coworkers talked about how he flew to Europe for the weekend, got drunk, and came home. They talked about the frats they were in during college. For me, I couldn't relate to them at all. I grew up poor in a very poor state, eating ramen noodles for most of my meals. College was about getting my education, not partying or going into frats. My college years were after my time in the army, so I never even had a real college experience in that way. I had never been to Europe, and the only place I've ever been outside the US was the Middle East. I was married with 3 kids while these people were single, obsessing over their dogs. So I did not relate to any of these people. There is also a couple minor things or things I am not thinking about, but that was my nightmare working at Dish Network. I personally would never recommend working there. People who come from other corporate jobs to Dish have said it is very enjoyable compared to the previous companies they worked for. So I can only imagine how bad those companies are. I think people kind of have an idea of corporate America, but I felt it was way worse than anything I could have imagined. If you are going into corporate, I hope this video prepares you a little bit. With all that being said, thanks for listening to me, and I hope you have a blessed week, and I will talk to you on the next one.